Mark, you've worn many hats in your professional life. You are now at Uber. Can you talk a little bit, just for the sake of these guys who might not know, Uber has entered the advertising business. What are you guys doing? And then let's talk about what you're doing in video.
So we have, on the one hand, our advertising opportunities on the delivery side, which is Uber Eats, which is basically a sponsored listings program for restaurants and the like. So we have about 350,000 restaurants already on the platform in 31 markets. We are expanding into CPG advertisement as we are launching our grocery business or expanding our grocery business, going to alcohol, and many more things that you can get on our platform. In addition to that, we have launched advertising on our mobility platform. And here we have three main services. The first one is the app itself. So we know if someone is on the way to this hotel here, right, or on the way to the airport, or on the way to a Walmart, we can then target an advertisement in the app. We have recently launched an in-car tablet opportunity, which gives us the opportunity to really engage with the user when he's in the car for about 20 minutes.
And that's what it typically is, on average?
Yes, on average in the US it's about 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
In the car, right? And last but not least, we also have launched in 7 cities in the US in car tops business, so screens on top of cars. Which is with digital out-of-home.
Got it. Okay. All right. And so the units themselves, how much display, how much video? What's happening in video?
So the majority right now is still display. And the majority is also more performance-based. So CPC-based, it's really about the power of our own first-party data, including the opportunity to measure, especially on the lead side, with closed-loop attribution, you can measure ROAS.
And we will definitely talk about that.
Incrementality. Then on the mobility side, it's much more branding. So our advertisers come to us because of branding objectives that they have. It is mainly still display, and we're just not expanding into video systems.
Okay, great. So we are kind of set up for a couple conversations around measurement. So let's talk a little bit about measurement. You mentioned closed loop reporting. Clearly, that is what everyone is chasing. But in our prep conversation, you talked a lot about incrementality, which is one of my favorite words. So can you talk a little bit about how you guys think about measurement in your environment, and how you are maybe bringing brands along the journey toward thinking about incrementality?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are two things that you think about. First of all, advertisers obviously care about measurement, and care about ROAS, return on ad spend, right? And we can provide that, especially on the Eats platform, right? So if a restaurant participates in the sponsored listings program, they know how many menu views they will generate, they know how many orders they will generate, and therefore more money they can make on our platform. But interestingly enough, they're not so much actually interested in the ROAS itself. They're much more interested in the incremental ROAS to really find out what is sweet spot, how many more dollars should I actually put into the advertising program. When is it tipping point? And so it's really all about incrementality. The question is, how do you actually measure incrementality?
Right. So, and again, you're talking about incremental to the spend itself, essentially, and when you hit the point of diminishing returns.
Exactly.
Right, and finding that moment.
Finding the moment, exactly.
Finding
that sweet spot when you have to stop. Because more is inefficient and less is a missed opportunity.
Got it.
And so what's interesting about measuring now ROAS is that in the past it was kind of, you do your one-off campaigns, right? You measure a campaign, you establish benchmarks, and you try to employ the benchmark moving forward. What we are trying to do with our advertisers is actually to do an always-on measurement, which basically means we constantly try to run experiments, XPs, right? And then use, let's say, 5% of the budget to really show what is actually incrementality using holdout groups.
So 5% of the budget, always on holdout group to essentially look for the lift.
But it's a very new idea for most of our advertisers. Because they typically do, again, one-off campaigns, one-off measurements, one-off studies, reporting, a lot of kind of post-campaign reporting.
Versus always on.
Opposed to in real time while the campaigns actually execute.
It's interesting. It strikes me that we're having a very digital, we're having a conversation that's comfortable for digital people. And it's like very different, I think, than the conversation that you have with TV people. about the notion of measurement, and so I'm so struck by that. And I'm going to talk to Celeste from Dentsu next a little bit about that. It's, I think, very natural for you to be thinking about and talking about always-on incrementality. Is that, I mean, but that's sort of the Uber way anyway, right? Like Uber as a marketer is a very data-driven marketer.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Uber is really a data-driven company. It's really about XPs, right? We run everything XP, we try everything as part of experiments. So, and also when you come to our own market spending, the way how we deploy, it is indeed how can we provide incremental bookings, incremental trips, incremental dollars, right? It's all about incrementality. But even if I go back to my old days when I was at the agency side, right? And even in TV, right, it was about incremental reach. And the question was, how do we actually move TV dollars away from one player to the other? It was, how can I show by moving dollars away that I can generate incremental reach?
Right.
It was all about how can I move the last 5-10% of my budget from one player to another player, because that's where, again, the curve is diminishing, and that's where I get more efficiencies if I move the money into a new player, right? And that thinking basically is now what we are deploying as a marketer on the brand side and performance side, but also what we're now offering to our advertisers as they use us as a media player.
How do you tell that story to the advertiser, the kind of, let me help you understand why this is incremental to what you're already doing? Because you're part of a larger ecosystem, right? You're a part of a larger plan.
Exactly, you're part of the larger plan, but that's also kind of the beauty of being a newcomer, right? Which means in the beginning, if you do get the first dollars, your curve, your incrementality curve is actually quite steep, right? And then basically benefits us to say, okay, the first dollars work actually harder on our platform compared to where you have already kind of, where you're at your max or close to your max, right?
Right.
And having that conversation about incrementality is a good way to introduce Uber as another player in the media mix plan and why money should actually be shifted.
Okay. One of the conversations that we had in prep to this, which was kind of interesting, was the notion of a cost per customer journey. Now, I don't think you're advocating for a move to CPA pricing per se, but you are advocating for a mindset around understanding what it takes, essentially, to move someone through the customer journey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the idea basically is that if you think about the customer journey, it's all about awareness generation, consideration, and purchase, and eventually loyalty, right?
Yep.
And every advertiser wants to move consumers through that funnel in the most efficient and effective way. And yet, we are typically measuring branding campaigns independently from performance campaigns.
Yep.
And the question is now, how can you actually bring branding and performance campaigns together and have a holistic measurement approach across both? And so the idea is, how can you then show that once you start to create awareness of your users, how you then efficiently move them into the transaction phase? And that is the idea of how much does actually cost to move someone from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. And at Uber, we have now the opportunity to, on the one hand, create awareness on our mobility app, right? And then measure transactions on our Uber Eats platform.
Right, and you have the first-party data to do it.
We have the first-party data to bring everything together, and that's why we can now really show how hard it is, basically, right, to move people through the funnel, to create awareness, and to eventually then to transactions.
So just quickly on that, how prepared are brands to think about measuring in that way, where you're essentially collapsing the purchase life cycle, which is not necessarily how they're traditionally planning and buying?
I would say it's kind of early days, right? But it's also kind of the idea, right? When you want to launch something new, and Uber is a new platform, right? It's such fun, to be honest, right? To be a little disruptive, to do things a bit differently, right? And to get attention. The other good thing about Uber is that we have, as you mentioned, we have a tremendous amount of first-party data.
Yeah.
We do know if you're right now on the way to the airport, on the way to home, on the way whatever, right? So we know that we can use that opportunity to engage with our users. And the second piece, which I think is good about Uber's environment, is that when you're in a car, you are in a lean-back situation.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Which means that you're actually open-minded, to be distracted.
Yep, totally.
Something to engage with the advertisement, right? Or we just have launched today on the Uber Eats side a new ad format, which we show to users after they actually ordered their dinner.
Okay.
Right?
I think I just got that one, actually. I had that experience recently.
Yeah, so it's the idea is here, right? You ordered your dinner, you're waiting for the dinner to arrive, you are preparing yourself, what could you do tonight, right? And you eventually then are in this lean back situation where we can show you, let's say, an ad from a streaming provider. And eventually then subscribe.
Just casual mention, an ad from a streaming provider just for fun, as an example.
And then you basically use the provider when you are enjoying your dinner, right? So it's really about this idea, how can we on the one hand have first-party data, but also how can we connect it to user situations in which they are open-minded to actually engage with the ad itself.
The actual moments for the consumer. Yeah, right on. I think if you come back in a year, I will be very excited to hear the massive amount of growth that you have achieved and what you're doing in the video space.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much.